Welcome to WatchJojo Cooking. Today we're going to be making roasted tomato soup using all fresh ingredients. So in front of me, I've got a bunch of tomatoes. We have a couple pieces for our stock. So our twist today is we're going to be using balsamic vinegar to give it that extra little bit of a punch. And we're not just going to blend everything or like saute everything. We're going to saute our core, our marijuana, the carrots, onions, and celery. They go in every soup, and they're kind of your vegetable fluff. They give it a little bit extra substance, and they just accept flavors really nicely. And then for our tomatoes, we're gonna half and roast them with red onion and garlic. And that's gonna give it a bit of punch with olive oil to prevent it from like burning, and the balsamic vinegar to give it that punch I was talking about earlier. I am just trying to get the little bit of oil on the cloth, so I can just give it some nice coverage. I'm trying to, it's got a big spout, so I didn't want to overkill, but I think I'm gonna have to go a little harder. There we go, that's a little bit more better coverage. Yep, just getting oil everywhere. So we got some oil coverage here. So you can use that trick, like if you want to go a little harder, you can just pour in the middle and spread it around. Go a little harder. Because we're roasting and then blending, we want to get rid of these cores. So if you have like a tomato core, great. Don't use a knife. Watch out, because the knife can jump out and bite you. You can try a circular motion. You can go with the like 4-point stab here. A little more control if you're scared. And that's an option. There we go. The other option is, because we're halving them, you can go right down the middle. So by halving, you still don't want any of this. And you can just, you're gonna get a little bit of loss this way, but it's marginal, and you make sure that you're stuck with only edible, nice tomato. So here's more of the core. Just nice angle here, angle. I don't like this, so I'm gonna give it a little bit of an extra trim. Then we're gonna split this guy evenly. So for this, we're gonna go and dice it. So I've already taken off the ends here. So I'm gonna cut so that this is still connected. So when I chop in the opposite direction, we end up with this beautiful dice. Here. We don't have to go super fine on our mince here because we know we're blending this up. So just a quick crush and thin slice should do it, in my opinion. Check. There's garlic numero uno. Crush, crush, crush. Oh, potent garlic is potent. Ooh, I'm crying. So we prepped everything up we need for our like roasted tomatoes, but we need to add our seasonings for our great flavor. So first things first, we're gonna add sugar. So why add sugar to a soup? Well, the acidity and like almost like bitterness of your tomatoes, like tomato soup has that really strong flavor, but it gets balanced out really nicely by sugar. It tones it right down and allows all the other flavors to come to the forefront while still kind of tasting the tomato's flavor, but not its bitterness. So we're just seasoning, sugar here. So now we've got that. Now we'll go on to our other seasonings. We're gonna hit it with a little bit of cayenne for heat. Less than you think. Cayenne is super powerful. That's why I'm just like barely sprinkling it at all. Of course, no dish would be done without salt and pepper to bring out flavors. Here, you go very liberally on your salt. So the reason for that is you can always add more salt later, but once your soup reduces, you can't take salt away. Once it's there for good. And so you don't want to make the mistake, I should say, of over-salting your soup. You should basically just salt barely on your ingredients and then do all your salting once you're happy with the thickness of your soup. Pepper, I'm a little less scared of, mostly because I love spicy, I love pepper, I love that flavor, that heat. So now we're doing thyme. So this is fresh thyme, so I just want the leaves. So I'm gonna grab from where the stalk is firm. I'm gonna get all these leaves, and I'm just gonna sprinkle them in. I could chop them, but we know we're blending the dish, so we can get away with simplifying things. Don't work harder than you have to. Cooking is hard work already. There. So we're just see how many of these I can do at once. I had a stalk come with me. Nice. You don't want to end up with stalks in here from the thyme because it's far too potent. You're just looking for those leaves. Let's do this one more time. Boom. Get it? One more time. So now we're almost done spices. The only thing I have to do here is I need to still add my oil and vinegar to give it that extra moisture, because it's going to be in the oven long enough that the tomatoes are basically breaking down. So here I'm just going to go with a fine drizzle, and once I have all my oils in here, I'm just going to shove my hands in here and I'm going to mix everything in so that my veggies and everything is covered in the oil and the vinegar. Here we go. This one has a pour spout. You know how much easier to makes life? There, look at that. Much better, easier. This here is balsamic vinegar. It has a very powerful taste. Maybe in another video I'll show you how to make a balsamic vinaigrette with all fresh ingredients. That's really, really good. And using the emulsification process, it's like creamy, but there's no cream. And now I'm just made sure everything is nice and submerged. Oily. Getting messy can be fun. There you go. Oven's already preheated. Should preheat it before you start this whole process. Save yourself a lot of time. So, I'm gonna pop both these guys in the oven until they're ready. Depending on how big your tomatoes are, this can be anywhere from 20 to about 45 minutes, I'd say. While the tomatoes cooking in there, we're gonna move on to our veg base for our soup. So that is onions, carrots, and celery. We're gonna cut this pretty small, but just enough so that it cooks faster. And it doesn't have to be perfectly symmetrical or even, because this is a blended soup. We've got our veg going, so you can hear that in the background. So the reason we're using all that veg, instead of just like more tomatoes, is the tomatoes are a little bit more expensive, and they're a little bit more overpowering. The flavors are really strong, but the flavors of the veg that we put in once sauteed are very mild and take on other flavors very nicely, which makes it a lot easier to bulk up your soup with that veg and then blend it all together, and it still tastes like a tomato soup. It has that little bit extra complexity, and but you get a higher yield out of it for a little bit less money. And at the end of the day, isn't that what we're all trying to do, is save a couple of bucks? I have it on max right now, just while it gets hot, but I'll probably drop it to like 50% power or so. Your instincts are going to tell you you want to season this. Don't season it yet. And the reason for that is because once you season all these parts, you get them tasting just right, and then you mix them together, then their profile changes. Maybe you've added too much salt. Then you make the soup, you blend it up, you reduce it, and all of a sudden it's just an aggressively salty soup. And there's nothing you can do about it because you can't take salt out of a dish. You can't take it out. Once it's there, it's there. And soup reduces while it cooks. It becomes less, which makes the flavor stronger, and salt will always get stronger. It's unstoppable. Hot. Cool. So, how do we know they're done? Well, we can see all the juices there. The tomatoes are basically breaking down. We've got a little bit of char around the edge, but that's fine. I can save that. And if I poke these, I'm literally just crushing them with just like poking with a spoon. I'm not even using a knife or a fork, and they're just breaking right down. So that's perfect. So that's perfect for number one. That's perfect number two. Same test. Happy. Happy, happy, happy. Cool. So while these are still hot, I'm gonna grab a spatula, and I can tell that some of the sugars and stuff are sticking to the bottom. So I'm just gonna loosen everything up and rustle it around a little. Make sure that I can disconnect myself from any burns here, and that everything stays together. The onions are completely caramelized, and they've actually like lost their redness. All their juices are just in here now. They've taken on the flavor. You can smell the balsamic. That's the primary. Obviously, we don't have smell-o-vision because this isn't Futurama or anything, but you can smell the balsamic. It's one of the strongest flavors. So here we have a lightly sauteing, but what I want to see is, I want to see these onions become completely transparent and borderline brown. That's whenever the sugars start coming out, and that's a premium flavor. At this point, our veg is looking pretty well sauteed. The carrots still need a bit more time, but we're gonna let it simmer, and that's when they're gonna finally break down. My onions have a nice translucent, almost brown nature to them. You could go a little harder if you wanted, but I'm impatient. Still hot. Cool. So I'll grab this. So make sure to get all these juices in here. That's where all the flavor is. Track one. So I've got this base. It's at my fridge for a bit now. I double checked to make sure it still tastes good. The chunks on top is just like fat from the chicken. So I'm gonna drop this in. I'm probably gonna go with almost the whole thing. And so now, obviously it was cold, so it dropped my pan temperature. I'm gonna wait for this to get back up to heat. And then I'm gonna let it rock on like medium high until my carrots are done. And when my carrots are done, I'm gonna blitz it all so that it's nice and creamy and smooth. And then I'm actually gonna add some cream at the end, and that will like really bring it together. And of course we're gonna garnish with a little bit of pesto. Our carrots are officially like soft enough that I feel confident blending. If you want to play it safe, you can cool your soup first before you blend. I, however, like to live on the edge because I'm impatient. So I'm gonna just go. So I'm gonna use a stick blender, and the motion I'm gonna use is gonna help move everything around while I blend. I don't want to just have it sit there. In this case, I'm going to use about half, and you can see I'm yielding about 6 liters or so out of the soup, which is pretty good. At this point, you have your tomato soup. There's a few ways you could approach garnishing it, because you could melt Parmesan in, but it won't be very even. You could put basil leaves in, but I find that I like to add them just as I plate, because the basil will go brown in your soup within like 6 hours. So I don't like that. I'm not going to use dried basil because I don't like using dried spices. So everything I do for plating this, I would use like per bowl, and I would just use this soup as is and then garnish from there. We're gonna, now that it's cooked and done, gonna taste test and figure out what we need to add. So it's pretty plain right now, and that's because we avoided adding our salt and pepper until this point. So let's add some pepper. There. And some salt. Notice I went pretty hard on pepper. I'm gonna go pretty light on salt to start. Try again. And remember your spices are still gonna be cooking a little more, so you wanna go a little low. This is good. The things that it's missing at this point is kind of its partner ingredient. So in this case, that could be Parmesan. You could have a fresh brick of Parmesan like me and grate that up. Or you could go the basil route, tomato basil, very common. Today we made tomato soup. Showed you a couple ways of garnishes and the way I like to approach the dish, as well as just kind of some tips and tricks for soups in general. Thank you for watching. This has been WatchJojo Cooking.